Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome, dear learners. This is a video for the subject of education, for the course of Bachelor's in Education, and for the paper of Child Development and Learning. This video is based on the major topic of intelligence, and in this lecture, we will be discussing the different types of measurements of intelligence. This lecture has been recorded by Dr. Iram Khan. The course coordinator for this video is Dr. Iram Khan from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. She is also the presenter of this video. The academic expert or reviewer for this video is Professor Jasim Ahmed from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. This video is produced under the project DTH Swayam Prabha channels of MHRD, New Delhi. Hello dear students, I am Dr. Iram Khan, Assistant Professor at IASC Faculty of Education, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Today we are going to have a discussion on a very important topic of intelligence, and in this lecture we will be elaborating on the measurements of intelligence. So first of all, let us see what are the objectives of this session. So we will be in a position to describe different methods of measurements of intelligence. Then we will elaborate the uses of measurements of intelligence. We will be discussing the limitations of measurements of intelligence, and we will be explaining the nature of measurements of intelligence. So students, this lecture is based on the measurement of intelligence. In the previous lectures, we have already seen that what exactly is the meaning of intelligence, what are the different theories of intelligence. We have seen in detail the multiple intelligences theory of given by Howard Gardner, and here we are going to discuss on the measurement of intelligence. So we are only familiar with that the intelligence of an individual which is manifested by this individual on an intelligence test or different type of tests. So psychologists have devised so many such tests for the measurement of intelligence. So let us see that what exactly are the types of the intelligence test. So we will be discussing it in the form of the classification of intelligence tests. So as far as the administrative point of view is concerned, the intelligence tests can be classified into two broad categories. What are these categories? The first one is the individual test. What is this? Basically, the individual test is the one in which only one individual is tested at a time. Then there is the next one, which is known as the group test. The group test is signified by the testing of the group of individuals. So here in this group test, the group of individuals are tested at a time. So another way of classification of the intelligence test is that we actually make the classification basis in the form of the test which is taken in the way which is verbal or non-verbal. So we can say that there are the next classification is based on the nature of the intelligence test. So first is the verbal or language test. Then the next one is the non-verbal and non-language test. So what exactly is this verbal or language test? So basically these tests make use of language. So in these tests we can say that there are certain items which are asked. So language is the basis. So here the instructions are given in words, either in a written form or in a verbal form or in a oral form, or maybe there are few tests which are the combination of both the oral and the written. So individuals are required to use language as well as paper and pencil for giving the responses. These tests content is basically loaded with lots and lots of verbal material. So this is the first category, which is the verbal or language test. Then the next one, which is the non-verbal or the non-language test. So these tests involve such activities in which the use of language is not necessary. So the use of language is basically eradicated or eliminated from the test content, and the response uh, is actually accepted in a given directions. So basically these two types of verbal and non-verbal tests will also be the basis of this lecture. The typical examples of such non-verbal tests are the performance tests. And the principal characteristics of these non-verbal tests can be that these test contents are basically in the form of material objects. Then an individual has to do what is indicated either by the tester through oral instructions or by different signs, different symbols, or different type of methods which the tester is basically involving. So then the individual's responses depend on what this person does or performs rather than by anything he says or writes, because here in this case there is no any inclusion of any type of verbal or language type. Then generally these tests are individual tests, as we have also seen that these tests cannot be used as group tests, chiefly because it is necessary to supervise the individual testee at work and give this particular testee the necessary directions. So if we try to have a final picture of all types of tests in intelligence, we will have to keep in mind that both the ways of clarifying them, as we have already mentioned in the lecture, uh, is to be taken care of. So all these types of intelligence tests can be represented here in this diagram. You can see that the first classification of the intelligence test is in individual test and the group test. Then the individual test can be further classified into verbal test and the performance test. And most of the times the performance test is a typical form of a non-verbal test. Then in the category of group test, further the classification is done in two categories, and the first category is the verbal test and the other one is the non-verbal test. So in this way we can make a classification, a full picture of classification of the intelligence tests. And now we will be discussing all these types in detail one by one. So let us go ahead and see that what exactly these types are all about. So the first type of this particular classification is the individual verbal tests. So these type of tests involve the use of language, and they are administered to an individual at a time which belong to this basic category. So as an example of such tests, we can quote the first test, which is known as the Stanford-Binet scale. It is the revised form of the Binet-Simon test. So actually the French psychologist Alfred Binet is the father of intelligence test and the construction, basically the construction movement. So he, along with Theodore Simon, prepared a test in early 1905 consisting of 30 items graded for different levels. So the test includes different items, and the items can be ranged like there is one example that at age 3 uh, this test asks that point out your nose, your eyes and mouth. At the age of 7, the question is asked to the respondent that tell what is missing in the unfinished picture. So this is something in a way the test is actually analyzing the intelligence. So the test in this particular category, the scale are grouped into age levels extending from the age of 2 to 22. So the task to be performed by the testees in these various tests range from simple manipulation to abstract reasoning. So we can say that the other verbal individual intelligence tests which are used in India very commonly is one which is also an Indianized version, which is Samanya Buddhi Pariksha, and this test is an Indian adaptation of the well-known test of William Stephenson. So it has been prepared by State Bureau of Educational and Vocational Guidance, Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh. So we can say that these type of tests are used in the category of individual verbal tests. Now let us see the next type of category of the test, and this is the individual performance test. So as you have seen earlier, the complete non-verbal or non-language tests of intelligence for testing a person's intelligence at a time come under this classification. So in these tests, the contents and responses are in the form of performance and language is basically not being used at all. So in these type of tests, the items which require responses in terms of different motor activities are basically included. So in general, the activities on which the performance of an individual is tested can be categorized again into different forms. The first category can be the category of assessment through the building blocks or cube construction, where the subject or the respondent is asked to make a structure or design by different blocks or cubes which are supplied to this individual by the test taking agency or authority. So the example of these type of tests involving such type of activities can be the Coase block design test, Alexander's pass along test, and there is one more, Merrill Palmer block building test. And there are many more, but we will be exemplifying these three. The next type of activity or the category of activities under this type of test can be to fit the blocks into the holes. So here the test material of such types provides numerous blocks and a board in which there are different holes, and these corresponding blocks are to be filled by these particular blocks. So the subject or the respondent has to fit the blocks in these corresponding holes which are placed on the board. So the example of such type of test is the Seguin form board test and the Goddard form board test. Then the next type of activity can be tracing a maze. What we do in this particular type of activity, the test material consists of a series of different mazes of increasing difficulty, the puzzles. These mazes are basically the puzzles. So each printed on a separate sheet. So these mazes are basically printed on separate sheets. So here the respondents are basically required, or this particular respondent is required to trace with the pencil the path from entrance to exit. And the example for such type of test is the Porteous maze test, which involves the type of activity where you have to actually get the way of exiting from the like you have to enter and then you have to exit from the maze. So that is Porteous maze test. The next type of activity which is considered under this particular intelligence test is the picture arrangement or picture completion activity. In picture arrangement test, the task is to arrange in series a given set of picture or different pictures. So here in picture completion test, the respondent is required to complete the picture with the help of certain given pictures. And like every piece is actually cut, every picture is actually cut into different pieces. So the Healy pictorial completion test is one of the examples of such type of test. Here we can like we can see that in this Healy pictorial completion test, there is a picture which is cut into different sections, and the blocks or the parts of the pieces of the pictures are given to, like in a mixed form, is given to the respondent, and the respondent, by using his or her intelligence, is going to complete the picture. So in this way we do this particular activity of picture arrangement or picture completion. So these are the different activities or set of rules through which we do the individual performance test. So we have seen that these tests try to emphasize one or the other type of performance test. Instead of using one or two tests, a group of performance tests which are organized into a different way, either into a scale or into a kind of battery, is used for comprehensive picture of an individual's mental ability. If we want to assess the comprehensive type of assessment we want to do for a person's mental ability, we can use different set of these performance tests, so through which we can get the actual picture, a comprehensive picture of the mental ability of an individual. So some of the popularly known scales which can be used in the form of a battery or in a sequence are the Pinter-Patterson scale, the Arthur Point scale, then the Alexander's battery of performance tests. So these are few of those combination of tests which can be used to assess or to get the comprehensive picture of an individual's mental ability. So by now we have seen the individual category of the intelligence tests. So till now we have seen the performance test or the individual test. Here now we are going to start the group type of intelligence test. And then in this category, the first one is the group verbal intelligence test. So the test which actually have the necessary feature of use of language and are applied to a group of individuals at a time come under this particular category of group verbal intelligence tests. Some of the earlier tests belong to this particular category. Those olden tests which we were using, like the people were using in olden times. Like the first one here in this category is the Army Alpha test, which was first used and developed in the time of the World War I. The next one is the Army General Classification Test, which was developed in the time of World War II. So these tests were actually developed for the assessment or general intelligence of the personnels who were actually like the army people were trying to make them part of the army. So they took the basic intelligence test in the form of these particular tests. The test which was used in the World War I was Army Alpha test, which is very popular, and the other one, which is the Army General Classification test, which was developed and used in World War II. So right now we also have some group verbal tests, and in India even we have developed certain tests. There are tests which are constructed to actually assess the capacity, the intelligence capacity of individuals or the groups, and these tests are very popular in India as well. And we will just take the names of these particular tests, some of the names. So the first one here which I would like to mention in the category is the group test of general mental ability. In Hindi, we pronounce it as Samuhik Mansik Yogyata Pariksha, and this test is basically constructed by Dr. J.S. Jalota, and the basic language of this test is Hindi. The next in this category is the CIE Verbal Group Test of Intelligence. This is created by Professor Uday Shankar, and this test is also constructed in Hindi. The next in this category is the group test of intelligence prepared by Bureau of Psychology, Allahabad, and this is also in Hindi. Because all these tests which we are mentioning right now are the Indian intelligence tests for testing the intelligence, the verbal intelligence test of basically to check the intelligence of the groups. The next in this category is the General Mental Abilities Test prepared by Dr. P.S. Hundal of Punjab University. And then there are many more such type of tests which are used very popularly and uh, in most of the researches which are conducted on this particular topic of intelligence, the students, the researchers are using some of these tests, and they give approximate results, and there is no any because this particular topic of psychology or certain behavioral aspects of the person's personality are not in definite tense. So we cannot say that every test is perfect, but these are the popularly used tests which are used by lots and lots of researchers. Then let us come to the group non-verbal intelligence tests. These tests, as the name suggests, do not necessarily use the language and are applicable to the group of individuals at a time. So the difference between the performance test, which is used for an individual, and the non-verbal test, which is used for a group, is that one of the degrees, as far as their non-verbal nature is concerned, is basically the performance test require the manipulation of the concrete objects of materials supplied in the test by the subjects. Then the responses are purely motor in character, and they actually most of the times require the use of paper and pencil by the testee, except in few of the cases where like we have discussed about the maze test. So um, here the use of paper and pencil is must. So whereas the test material in the non-verbal test used for group testing is provided in the form of booklet, and it requires the use of pencil or like pen or pencil by the respondent. So we have seen that in these tests material does not contain words or numerical figures. It contains pictures, diagrams, and geometrical figures which are printed on this particular booklet which is given to the group of the respondents. So the subject or the respondent is required to do such activities as to fill in some empty spaces, to draw some simple figures, to point out similarities and dissimilarities, and then such type of activities which are actually listed in the booklet. So in this way, the subject uses the paper and pencil, and this individual or the individuals of the group does not need to know words or numerical figures. So here what actually this individual is to do is explained clearly by the examiner, usually through clear demonstrations, so that the there is least like possibility of using the language. Few of the examples of such type of test, let us just have a look. The first example is the army beta test. This was developed in World War I in the USA for testing the intelligence of those soldiers who were either illiterates or were not used to English language. Then the number 2 test is in this category is the Chicago non-verbal test. This non-verbal test has been proved most useful for the young children who were aged between 12 to 13. Then the next test in this category is Raven's progressive matrices test. This test was developed in the United Kingdom. It is a very much popular non-verbal group test of intelligence. This test has been designed to evaluate the individual's ability to see relationship between geometric figures or designs, to perceive the structure of the design in order to select the appropriate part for completion of each pattern. The next test in this particular category is the CIE non-verbal group test of intelligence, which is like basically it is prepared by J.W. Jenkins, and the test is printed by CIE for adaptation into Hindi medium schools. So these were few of those group non-verbal intelligence tests which we wanted to discuss. Now let us come to the uses of intelligence tests. So, because we have seen that there are a lot of types and methods of the intelligence tests, but what exactly these tests are actually used for? So the first use is that they are used for the purpose of selection. Intelligence tests are often used for the purpose of making selections of the suitable candidates for activities of admission in a particular course of instruction, like in any of the courses, in any of the academic courses or professional courses, then to decide the cases of scholarships, choosing candidates for assigning some specific responsibilities which are of highly specific nature, like there are certain skills or certain type of abilities which are required. Then the selection of candidates for participation in various co-curricular activities. So these are those tasks which are related to the selection of the candidates. Then the next use of the intelligence tests can be for the purpose of classification. So these intelligence tests help the teachers or the administrators to classify the students as bright, dull, or average. And in this way, they make it possible to put them into more homogeneous groups in order to bring efficiency in teaching learning process. As per my opinion, I don't consider this as the ideal way to teach, because heterogeneity is the essence of a classroom. We can't categorize or we cannot make a classification in our students. And if we make this classification, then there will be an inferiority or superiority complex which will arrive in the students. So this practice should be avoided. But this is one of the use of the intelligence tests, where these tests are used for the purpose of classification among the students. Few of the governments are also doing this type of practice, but this should be avoided. The next use of the intelligence test are for the purpose of promotion. So intelligence tests can prove themselves as one of the useful instruments in promoting the individuals in different educational fields or in different occupational and social situations where there is a need of study or to go higher or to actually perform certain like higher order thinking skills, or using these higher order thinking skills, or going ahead and leading uh, an institution. So these type of promotional activities also required to test the intelligence of an individual. The next type of use of the intelligence test can be in checking the potential of an individual. If you want to check the potential of any individual, so the intelligence tests help in revealing the different potentialities of an individual, and in this way making it possible to predict a person's success in a particular field. So the knowledge of such potentiality helps the teacher in different ways. The particular way can be to provide the guidance. Like if a teacher is willing to provide a specific type of guidance, then the teacher can analyze the intelligence of this individual, and then the teacher or a guidance personnel can give the guidance to the individual in a selection of various courses of instruction and occupations. Then the next can be to help in learning process. The teacher can plan the teaching learning activities with the help of this knowledge of the intelligence of this particular individual, and then the results of the intelligence test can actually provide the teacher, they can be helpful for the teacher in devising the learning process. Then the next can be to establish a proper level of aspiration. Basically, with this, the teacher can go ahead and realistically design the level of aspiration and the teaching learning way in which the teacher can design her class. Then the next use of the intelligence test can be for diagnostic purpose. We can we can observe certain exceptional children or gifted children or the backward and mentally retarded children in our classroom. So if these the problem or the nature of special need can be detected with the help of these different intelligence tests, the strategies to actually use different teaching methods or any type of technology to actually help these children can be very much easier. Moreover, the intelligence test help in the diagnosis of the root cause of the problematic behavior of the child, and in the same way it suggests the possible remedy also. So the intelligence test can be positively used for the diagnostic purpose. Then the next use can be for different research works. Intelligence testing has been proved very useful in psychological, sociological, and educational researches. For example, in deciding the relative role of heredity and environment in the process of growth and development. And the research workers have made much use of intelligence testing to actually do a lot of researches which are useful in different areas of the education of the students, to design different educational methodologies, to design the curriculum, to design the teaching aids, to design the different diagnostic ways and the remedial measures. The test results can be used. So in this way we can see that there are a lot of uses of these intelligence tests. Then let us see the different limitations, because if a thing or a particular device is having certain uses, so there are certain limitations also which are actually enshrined with the type of methodology. So there are certain limitations of intelligence tests too. So the intelligence tests have given birth to so many problems. What are these problems we will be discussing? So due to their limitations and the shortcomings, there are certain things which actually arrived, and in few of the cases the use of intelligence tests are actually stopped. So let us see what are those limitations one by one. So the first one is that the intelligence tests and the students, like how the intelligence tests can actually affect the students. So intelligence tests label some students as superior and the others as inferior. So this type of knowledge creates so many problems. Children who are slightly dull or um, brilliant enough to realize through the result of intelligence tests that they are slow to learn, they actually get the inferiority complex. Then it makes them disappointed and causes inferiority feelings, and ultimately actually hampers their future. On the other hand, the students with a slightly higher side of intelligence may create overconfidence in them. So, if it is known to them that the result of the intelligence test has actually kept them in the higher side, there is a possibility that they become overconfident, and there is a kind of very much possibility is there that these students may not give serious attention to their work or to their studies, and also the consciousness of their superiority may result in misbehavior on their part. So this superiority complex can also be a kind of malfunctioning, and it can turn into a problematic childhood. So this is something which is showing that intelligence test and the students, like if the intelligence test is being taken, then it should be the responsibility of the teacher that the test results should be not actually revealed to the students to avoid these type of complexes. Then the next limitation is the intelligence test on the part of the teachers. What will be the scenario towards the teachers? So teachers, after knowing the intelligence level or the IQ of the child, they can make a permanent idea or a prejudice towards the child's potentialities and abilities. They try to see this child through the lens of this child's IQ. They leave no attempt to discourage or to create overconfidence in the students according to the level of their intelligence, which are announced by these tests. So we can see that the knowledge of the intelligence of the student for a teacher may result in a kind of prejudicial, like prejudice, or a kind of um, some sort of uh, difficult situation on the part of the teacher also. So this teacher may be entirely responsible of the people's failure on the inferiority part of the intelligence. And for a bright people, this teacher can think that he would be able to do himself. So in this way, the knowledge of the intelligence which is supplied by these tests, the results of these tests may bring a kind of disastrous result on the part of the teacher. So this is something which is of very much important. So even if the administrators are taking the test, again there is the responsibility of these people to keep it very much use for only the purpose for which they are taking the test. The next limitation can be that there can be the uh, proliferation of segregation and conflicts. Intelligence test results have been misused to uphold the theory of royal blood, segregation, and sectarian outlook. In the United States of America, it has led to a conflict between the Negro and the white population. So the conflict in actual sense is the result of a misconception about the predictive value of these tests and their correlation with the hereditary factor. So these are some of those limitations which are there with the intelligence test. So I would suggest that these tests should be used, but with very much care, and the result of the test should be actually very properly kept, and they should not be revealed to anybody who is not related to the test. So in this way, we can say that it is not proper to give overweightage to intelligence tests. They should not be accepted as the only and only measure of an individual's degree of ability to, to do the learning, or to perform any particular task. They should not be made an instrument of creating complexes among the students and misunderstanding among the teachers. So we can say in a as a crux that the result of these must be all these intelligence tests must be interpreted and used very intelligently. They should be taken as the means and not the end in themselves. So this is something which is very important whenever we are using the intelligence tests. Now the question is that can one intelligence test measure in definite terms? Measurement of intelligence is not possible in the same way as we measure a piece of cloth or the temperature of our body. Why it is not possible can be understood by few of the points which I am going to make. The first point is that the nature of the thing we want to measure, what exactly we are willing to measure, is the intelligence. Intelligence is not a thing. It is only an idea, an abstraction. So therefore, its measurement is not possible like the measurement of a piece of wood or a piece of cloth or anything. Then the next point is that the nature of the instrument or the scale by which intelligence is being measured, the tool or this particular scale, the test which I'm talking about, the test which is actually used for measuring. So in measuring the piece of cloth, we use a scale which is made up of absolute units. For measuring temperature of the body, we use thermometers having units of measurements like in degrees or in Celsius. So in such measurements, we use the scales made up of absolute units, and the instrument gives somewhat reliable and valid results. But in case of intelligence measurement, we do not have such type of definite scales, such type of reliable scales. So the standard of measurement is a group performance. So we can't say that the the result of the test or the result of the measurement of the intelligence can be that much perfect. So we can say that when we measure intelligence of an individual with the help of an intelligence test, we try to interpret the resulting score in the light of different norms which are established according to different group performance. So by the author of this test, in the way, in this particular way, a person's intelligence is determined relatively to the classified group to which he or she belongs. So whereas in the case of a piece of cloth, the absolute measurement is possible. Here in this case of intelligence measurement, we have relative measurement, because we are comparing the responses of one person with the other. So with the differences in the nature of measuring instruments, we can observe that in case of a piece of cloth or a piece of wood or the temperature of the body, it is convenient to use the measuring instrument when and where we require its need. But in this case, it is very much difficult. In case of measuring a person's intelligence, it is difficult. So it is difficult to use intelligence test with the similar convenience and ease. The administration as well as interpretation of these tests require sufficient competency, skill, and basically the labor on the part of the examiner or the person who is taking the test. So in this way, we can see that the measurement of intelligence is not so simple, or not very much definite or reliable or a valid task as the measurement of a piece of wood or temperature of body or piece of cloth. So with this, now we have reached to the summary of this lecture. We have seen that measurement of intelligence is not possible in the same way as we measure a piece of cloth or the body temperature, but it can be well assessed with the help of some or the other intelligence tests categorized as individual and group tests involving the use of verbal and non-verbal test material. In individual test, we test one individual at a time, but in group test, a group of individuals can be tested at a given time. So in all these individual as well as group tests, we either try to make up of the verbal material, that is the language or non-verbal material for testing the intellectual level of our students. Performance tests are a typical example of such type of non-verbal, or we can say that no use of language is required here. So the non-verbal tests where we try to test the intelligence of a student on the basis of the performance in some intellectual task. So intelligence tests have their advantages as well as drawbacks. We have seen that there are a lot of drawbacks as well, but still we cannot avoid uh, or we cannot say that they are not useful. So these can be properly utilized for the purpose of selection, classification, promotion, diagnosis, and assessment of a person's potentiality. Besides being used in the task of guidance, counseling, and research work, and the result of these tests can also be, we have to be very much careful about the results because they can be misused by the students in perpetuating a number of complexes, and these can be an inferiority complex or superiority complex, then the fears and disappointments, many more. So they may also make their viewpoint, like there can be different viewpoints which can be made by the teachers towards the students, and it can give birth to many type of segregations and conflicts in the society. So the whole idea is that we have to use the test, we have to measure the intelligence whenever it is required, but we have to be very cautious about revealing the results because it can make an impact on the society. So this was all about the measurement of intelligence. And these are few of the references and consulted links which were used when I was preparing the discussion. I hope that this discussion is going to be very much useful for you all, and hope to see you again in some other lecture. Thank you so much. Dear students, we were watching a video on intelligence, and in this lecture we discussed about measurement of intelligence. This video lecture was recorded by faculty at home during the national lockdown period for COVID-19 pandemic using minimal technical resources. Technical errors, if any, are unintentional and may please be ignored. For any queries with regard to this lecture or broadcast, kindly send your email to techsupport@dth.ac.in. Thank you so much.